Good morning, my gamers. I just want to do a little piece about the state of video games in 2021. Now, I'm on here talking next to a bunch of other YouTubers who have been playing games for a long time. The likes of Rich at Review Tech, one of the guys I love. A bunch of guys like that. ETA Prime, there's a lot of great guys. Retro Game Corp, those are some of my favorites on YouTube. But I come from a time where I was alive before video games even existed. So the very first console I had was the Atari 2600. That thing was basically the first video game console ever. You would go buy at a store and bring home, hook up to the TV, and you'd play. There was little handheld consoles that existed before that. I remember one I had when I was a kid was a little football that you would hold in your hand, and it was just little dots, and you would just make it run, and it was so not football, but it was amazing. It made me wonder so much about technology. And so then came the 2600. I was probably 7 or 8 years old. It was the first video game console really to come out ever. And from there on, there was a whole bunch of ColecoVision and other things that tried to copy it. It was very, very bare bones, especially compared to like today's standards of video games. Oh my gosh, it was like no graphics on there. It was ridiculous, but man, mind blowing for the time when I was just a young lad. So I really feel like my life has walked hand in hand, coincided with video games from their inception. Like we were both born at the same time, basically. I was about 7 years old when video games really first started to take off. And that's when like a kid starts to play with that kind of stuff. And so I feel like video games kind of were born for me. Like they came out right at the time when I needed them. And that's what I spent my life doing when I was a kid. In previous videos, you may have heard me say that my father walked away when I was a year old. Didn't even know me that first year. Basically had a relationship with my mother for 2 weeks, and then she came back to me and said, "This is your baby." I said, "No, it's not." So in my life, I never had a father. She never remarried. She never found another man. She was always having to work all the time. So I was at home. What did I do? I played games. That was like what got me through life. It was like my crutch to keep me out of gangs and jail and drugs and just being bad. Games was like my I don't know what you call it, my saving grace, I guess. I need to get power because I'm about to lose juice here. My saving grace was the video games. So I have known them my entire life. I have played virtually every single console. I have owned virtually everything. I absolutely know every video game that's ever been out. Like I know video game consoles. I've only owned obviously a handful of them. I have not owned everything, but I have known about just about all of them. Later in life here, I was able to get into retro gaming and go back to play a lot of the games I didn't get to play when I was a kid. So gaming's been one of the biggest things in my life, period. So that being said, I have experience with quite a bit of software, quite a bit of different hardware. And what I can say is this. As someone who was there before there was video games, and someone there that's watched video games throughout his entire life, what I've come to find, the state of games in 2021, just like the title says, there's not enough innovation. Right now, as I watch, as there's the Xbox and the new PlayStation, they're coming out. They've upped the hardware price, so it went from 300 to 500 because they want to put in solid state drives and other things in the console to make it faster. But they've not said anything about the software. And traditionally, software sells hardware. Gamers don't go out and buy expensive hardware units praying that there's going to be great software to play on those units, on those devices. It's not how it works. I seem to think that the makers of video games now believe that people only want to play 4K on a whatever display and, no, people don't care. I would rather have the coolest software game on earth on an Atari 2600, the very first video game console with no graphics and no nothing and nothing. I'd rather play it on there than to play some game that's garbage on 4K now, that's a rehash or a remake of something old that wasn't even all that great back then. Like, that's all that's happening as far as new video games on current consoles. They want to make remasters and remakes because they're just done coming up with great ideas or innovating. Let me give you an example. One of the best innovations I ever come across was SOCOM Navy SEALs. Was one of the first video games to ever allow using your voice to control AI characters in-game. So if you weren't playing online in SOCOM Navy SEALs, which was a PlayStation 2 exclusive back in the day when the PlayStation 2 had come out. I love SOCOM, by the way, big fan. I own all of them. Part of the reason was I could use a headset microphone to issue commands to AI bots. Unbelievable for the time. Astounding. And there's actually a few other games that came out on the Xbox and other platforms that were similar military type games that tried to do the same thing. There was Rainbow Six, where you could actually issue some commands through your headset. This was innovation. The more immersed I can get in a video game, the better off, right? That's why VR is kicking it right now over the consoles, because it's far more immersive. I feel like I'm actually in the game. I call them, and I'd like to coin this today, first-person video games. Now, not all games on VR are per se first-person, but most of them are. I mean, let's face it, that's what they're trying to mimic, is first-person with everything you do in VR. First-person video gaming is what VR really is. That's the VR experience. And it's so immersive compared to flat screen traditional video gaming, and it's a whole new immersive thing that's going on. So as the traditional video game makers are coming out with their new expensive consoles, going up from $300 to $500 for the new 4K SSD, blah, 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 that we don't care about, they really need to be thinking about innovative new software titles to push that hardware, because I'm not interested, and I've been buying consoles my whole life. I'm the biggest video game fan in the world. I've bought PCs to play on PC. I play on handhelds. I play on consoles. I got watches. I have a watch, actually, that I got when I was like 10 that was a Pac-Man watch. And you literally had a little joystick in there, and you could play Pac-Man on this watch. Like, I am the video game king. I love video games. I was so compelled, I started doing videos recently on handheld retro gaming units that come from China, primarily, because my country's too dumb to build them. I come to find there's a huge, huge interest in video games and video game units. I've put up some YouTube videos recently talking about the differences in some of these handheld units, and boy, the interest is through the roof. I could talk about God all day and nobody cares. I talk about Chinese handheld gaming units for retro games, and dude, I get hits up the wazoo. So here I am today making a generalized video gaming video about the state of games in 2021. I'm going to cover everything as far as the beginning of video games, which I did, talking about the early Atari and how it evolved from there, from Nintendo and Sega, and all the way up through the different systems we've had. Well, what I'm talking about now is the innovation currently today in 2021 of the software. There is no games currently coming out on the current software, or on the current hardware rather, current consoles, PS5 and the X series, whatever. There's no games that allow me to use my voice, for example. The SOCOM games did it. There was Brother in Arms that came out on Xbox. There were some Tom Clancy titles that came out with the ability to use your voice. I come to find out Manhunt, one of my favorite all-time Rockstar games, awesome stealth game if you don't know about it, that one used voice as well. You could actually like be in the shadows of guys you were trying to hit from the shadows and say, psst, and the guy would be like, what? And come over to you. Like, dude, that is innovation. That gets me feeling like I am completely immersed in the game. Now, what I like to see is VR is already so much more immersive than 3D gaming, flat screen gaming, as I call it, that when I use my voice in a VR game, oh my God, dude, that is like total immersion. If I can use my, like all of my senses, God, if I could taste something in a VR game, like if I could smell something in a VR game, like if the more senses you can use in a game, the more immersive an experience it is. And the more, I don't know, the more you like it. the more it feels comfortable and relatable and familiar, I suppose. So we're in this state of gaming where we have the likes of Nintendo, who pretty much own the kiddie market. They put out all the Mario, Zelda, all the great games for kids. That's wonderful. That's great. But eventually you become an adult, and how do you game as an adult? What do you do? Well, if you don't want to play all the Mario and the Zelda anymore, it's great stuff, but there's newer, more adult stuff. I love military. I got into military sims when I got older. I love the Battlefield. I love the Call of Duty. I love anything that's military based, Arma. I mean, you name it. Anything Tom Clancy, anything. So that's what I got into as I got older. And like Nintendo's not all about that. That's not where they make their bread and butter. So I look to go play my games on other platforms. If you want to go handheld, kind of tough to find military adult type games, Grand Theft Auto, whatever, adult themed games on handhelds these days. You pretty much got like Android for your handheld. Windows and Microsoft has never come out with a handheld anything. They really don't care less about being mobile or whatever. They probably just think, well, you use a phone, so whatever. But let's talk about phones for a minute in the state of gaming. So here's all the companies that have said, that I've had to hear say, we're not going to do games anymore because cell phones have just taken over gaming. Primarily Sony. Sony says, we're not going to make a Vita anymore, which means life. You drop something after 5 years called life. Honestly. We're going to drop life because people are gaming on cell phones instead. Okay. If you actually were a gamer and made that statement, you wouldn't even make that statement. You couldn't make that statement. There is no gamer that wishes to touch a small little glass device and push on flat buttons there that represent buttons to actually play a game. Your thumbs get in the way of what you're seeing. You already have too small of a screen, and no tactile is not good. Gamers love tactile. We love to feel the sticks. We love to be able to flick that stick just the right amount, because we know how it works, that we can just flick that crosshair right onto that bad guy, from one bad guy to the next, just boom, in a millisecond. You gauge that from tactile feedback, from the responsiveness of your sticks, of your buttons, of your things that you push. Certainly not a phony button built into the software behind the glass on a flat screen. So if you're a gamer, you would never make the statement, I'm going to replace my gaming with a cell phone. That's just stupidity. It's never going to happen. Even with the Razer Kishis of the world, where you can like slip your cell phone in there, sometimes latency with Bluetooth, I mean, there's issues, right? It's not all perfect. Even if it was perfect with no latency, having to strap it around, bring it around with me, extra devices, this and that. So there's been a real influx of, I should just put my hair back, I think. There's been a real influx of these retro gaming handhelds and retro gaming because there's no innovation in current software that's trying to push more expensive hardware, right? I'm not going to go out and get a gaming PC anymore. Let me tell you the story there. Battlefield, one of the greatest games of my early adult life that I had to play. A buddy of mine turned me on to it. I had to go experiment and find out for my own. At the time, was only playable on PC. So I had to go get myself a game rig PC to go play Battlefield. And yeah, it was wonderful. It was amazing. Even though I couldn't get a really high dollar rig, I did get, kind of a cheap PC. And even that had to be on low settings. So it didn't look great, but I got to play the game. It was fun. I got in there with some buddies. We had a blast. It was wonderful. Very quickly, Battlefield went on to the consoles. The very first experiment that DICE did, who's the makers of the game, EA DICE, DICE decided that they were going to do a small 4-man against 4-man. They called it, it was Battlefield Bad Company. And it was the first foray into console Battlefield. And so at that point, the consoles took over on Battlefield and playing PC games, but they couldn't play them to the fullest extent. So for example, I didn't ever want to play the same Battlefield game on console because it had smaller maps, accommodate less players, less flying vehicles for the same price or even more. So I was not into buying it on the consoles. I was going to play it on the PC. But the PC was a large investment. A lot of money, a lot of tinkering, a lot of maintaining. You got to deal with updates, constant software, security, this and that. Stuff you don't deal with if you get just like a console, an Xbox, a PlayStation, bring it home. All that stuff's taken care of. So it all goes back to the software on these consoles. And we don't have software that's keeping up with the hardware. And so it's pushed me out of even having the next console. I've always bought the next console my whole life. I remember being excited about buying the PlayStation 2. I remember being super excited about buying the SOCOM that came out at that time with the SOCOM headset. Logitech had put out a SOCOM headset, and man, it was just incredible. So this last year with the Xbox One, they never put out an Xbox headset. It's possible that it runs Bluetooth headsets. I don't think it does. I think you actually have to have like a headset that works with the Xbox. I don't think the Xbox has just like Bluetooth. You can just connect any old Bluetooth headset with. So I was looking for a Xbox 360 style headset, wireless headset that was awesome when the 360 was out. I thought for sure that would come out on the Xbox One. Never did. They never put out a decent over-the-ear style, single-ear chat headset that you would use like in a military game to talk to your squad. They never put that out on the Xbox One. They finally came out with some sort of headset that's kind of in that vein. It's a big old giant thing that goes over your ear, but it's a single-ear headset. They just came out with it on the new Xbox, but they skipped one whole generation. It's like, to me, that was not innovating. Maybe if they had highly advertised, hey, there's Bluetooth in this Xbox and you can connect any headset you want, okay, maybe. But they never really did that. So the games are not coming out with very much innovation other than trying to keep up with 4K graphics for the hardware. Like that's not what sells games. So to all you game makers right now out there, Xbox, PlayStation, shooting yourselves in the foot, dude. You're making SSD 4K consoles with no software attached other than remasters and rehashes and whatever remakes and garbage IPs that have been around forever. People need new IPs. We need new games that innovate. Use motion, use whatever to innovate, man. Make it new, make it a more innovative experience, because VR is kicking your butt there. VR is now off and running on a $300 console, easy to get started. The games are $30 usually, around that price. Talking Quest 2 here. So the barrier to entry to VR has gotten very, very low. And now traditional console makers are making the price of their consoles go up. Dude, you're just squeezing yourself out. You don't have software to push that hardware sales, and the hardware from the VR is going to kick your hardware out. So like Microsoft, Sony, Nintendo's got a lock on the kid software, so they're kind of immune to this stuff. But for an older crowd, PlayStation and Xbox, dude, you are killing yourselves. You are going to wind up with nobody buying your console someday. Right now, to this day, everybody's trying to buy them, and all the big whoop-de this and that. They're out of stock everywhere. There's shortages. There's COVID. There's all these things that are making them so you can't get it. Scalpers, all these things making it so you can't get the hardware. But really, you'd be a fool to be chasing after an Xbox or a PlayStation right now. And I'm the biggest gamer on earth, and I'm saying that. And why is it that way? Because there's no innovative software that's following up with this hardware. There's just none. There's a few handful of games in all of gaming that have actually utilized voice commands. Really? Dude, voice commands should be a thing. Like taking cover in a video game just became like the thing. Like every single video game has you use cover now, ever since like they introduced it in like, I don't know. There was some first game that introduced cover. I think it was like one of those Gears of War or something like that, had the cover system where you just plop up against anything that was square and you can cover behind it. So cover became a huge thing in military games. It just went out like wildfire. Like cover is just a thing now. So should voice be. So should a lot of things be. Just a thing now that like we've just gotten used to. Voice commands to AI should be like cover is. Should just be in every single game. The innovation is stifled, partly because independent, smaller game makers are just bought up by the behemoths, and then the behemoths don't want to try anything unless it makes them ungodly amounts of money. That's not how we innovate, folks. Innovation is done by taking a risk, putting out a game that maybe possibly people don't want to play, but it's so amazing in what it does that a lot of people want to play. I mean, that's how we innovate. That's how we create new stuff. Just because the hardware gets better doesn't mean the software that follows it is any better. Right? If the software doesn't innovate, innovative hardware is not going to sell. That's, crappy software, quite honestly. Rehashes and remasters and remakes are not going to cut it on new hardware. They're going to have very innovative new software that's going to have to get my attention. So I want to go back to consoles because I really don't want to. I was totally disgusted by PC. Oh my God. When I got on the PC from Battlefield, because it's the only way you could play Battlefield, I come to find that I wind up doing tech support. If I want to play Battlefield on the best way I can, the biggest maps, the most people, the most vehicles, the best graphics, I've got to invest a ton of money, and then I got to be tech support all the time. And then the worst part about it is, on PC, they allow hackers. So when I go play my Battlefield game where I've spent $1,500 on a game rig, I've bought the game, I've done everything, I'm in there with all my Logitech peripherals, my game pads, my mice, my keyboard, the one I've spent everything, thousands. I go into the PC game to play Battlefield. Guess what? Hackers are in there ruining it for me. Oh my God, dude. So I decided no more PCs to play video games. I will play on an Xbox or a handheld or whatever. I will never play on the PC again, dude. And really what the PC has come to be strongest in is not in the AAA games where it can look better slightly than the consoles because it's ruined by cheaters. PC gaming is really worthless compared to console gaming in this regard. It really is. I don't have to do any tech support, and I don't have to worry about cheaters when I play on a console. And that's really the benefit of the console versus the PC. So I'm out of the PC market. I'm not going to play stupidity. Even nowadays, like I was out of the PC market years ago because Battlefield basically went to the consoles and was just as large in the consoles as it was on the PC. So I was like, why even get a PC now? Favorite software game is now on anything. And it plays the same way on all of them. So no more PC. I do not care. Even though they're talking about the new Battlefield 6 coming out, being bigger on PC and bigger maps and bigger this, trying to get me in the same game. Dude, I am not spending a dime on a new PC. Played on the old consoles, and if it doesn't play well, if it's smaller maps or whatever, I don't even care. I don't care. You don't innovate the software enough for me to be all over Battlefield. That's been my #1 favorite game over all games my entire life. I'm the biggest Battlefield fan ever. And I've even gotten sick and tired of it. I was disgusted by it when it went to the ancient wars, rather than a more modern setting, more modern vehicles and weapons and this and that. I don't like going back to old school World War II. Everything's bolt action. Are you kidding me? I mean, no, dude, no. So when they went to there, they also went to one that was a cops and robbers kind of game that I've never played at all. Basically, Battlefield just kicked me off. They just made me not interested. They have not really put a lot of new things into the game. Last time, their last version, their World War II one, it was like I was getting camped at the spawn point, and that's something that's not supposed to happen in a Battlefield game. Usually they try to give you an opportunity to spawn and get out there and get into the battle before you start getting your butt handed to you, but not in that last one. You could pretty much spawn and you're dead. You spawn and you were dead. There was no way to even move to go do anything. I was like 20 minutes of that and I was done. Dude, where's the innovation there, Battlefield? And that's you're my favorite game. I would never speak bad about Battlefield. I promote that game to everyone. When they ask me why, I tell them why. Because you can fly and drive and shoot and do anything you want in that game. There's a lot of the games that let you do one or the other of that. Maybe you can shoot in this game, but you can't fly or drive. Maybe you can fly or drive, but you can't shoot. There's always a one or the other trade-off. But in Battlefield, you can do it all. Parachute. Defibrillator, things that very uncommon to other video games. Things that were very innovative. When Battlefield first came out, it was innovative to have defibrillators. It was innovative to have parachutes. It was innovative to have these different things that, man, that's all we've had now for all the Battlefields that have ever been. So I love innovation. I love new things in games. I love new storylines, new plots, new twists, new, you know. And I just don't see a lot of that in video games these days. And so I really have no inclination to buy another gaming PC or get involved in that nasty mess. I don't want to be tech support. I'd rather play games than be tech support, quite honestly. When you pop in a PC game and it won't play for whatever reason, now you're all over the internet spending your life researching what's the dealio. And it's usually just some stupidity by Microsoft, a bad update, or they've changed DirectX or whatever on you in the background, and you just screwed and don't know why. I had one whole year on PC gaming where all the controls were busted on using my Xbox or my Logitech controller. It was basically X whatever, the basic controller configurations that are used by every game that utilizes a controller. That was busted for a year because DirectX got broken in a Microsoft update because I kept all my stuff totally updated. Go to install a year later Watch Dogs. That Watch Dogs came with its own version of DirectX, fixed the problem, and boom, I was able to use my controller again, my Logitech controller. X Input, that's what it's called. X Input worked just fine after that. But this is the kind of weird, crazy, stupid crap you'll deal with when you PC game. So not only is it expensive as all get out, but you don't get much more than you'd get on the consoles. And quite honestly, if I don't have to deal with cheaters or things like that, I would much rather be on the console, not having to deal with that and having slightly downgraded graphics, quite honestly. So PC gaming chased me out of it probably 5 or 6 years ago. I will never go back to another PC gaming rig ever. And then the consoles now are chasing me out. Like, I don't want to spend $500 on a new Xbox. When I just got the previous Xbox One, they came up with an Xbox One X at the end of the Xbox One life cycle. And that thing was $600, $650. I mean, it was outrageous. It was more than the new consoles are. So if Sony thinks I'm going to go out and get their new console when they just offered me a way expensive console 5 years ago, dude, no. The software is just not there. What am I going to play on it? I don't have games to play on my old Xbox One X that was amazing and the most powerful thing at the time. Best hardware ever. What was the games? The games were like non-existent. There was garbage for games on that thing. Like I have a couple of Ghost Recons. I have Hitman. I have my favorite franchises that came out on that thing, but there was nothing new on there ever. The new games were just not innovating. To this day, what games can you use your voice to issue commands to anybody? How can you use your voice in any game? Well, virtually none to this day, dude. And I'm like 45 now. I'm like getting old. I'm actually 47. So for all these years, games have not really innovated. They've always had this connotation that it was like for kids and you're an idiot if you're an adult and you play games. So like there's been legislation against video games. Like they're like the stepchild of everything. Like you can't even buy, like if you buy a video game and take it home and it doesn't work, you can't take it back to the store and say, I want my money back. It's not like a table or a chair. Like if the table or chair has a foot that breaks and you fall over, you can't take it back and say, hey, I want my money back, and they'll give you a new one. Software doesn't work that way. It's still treated like a stepchild. You go buy software and it doesn't work, tough poopy for you. You ain't going to take it back and get a refund. They ain't going to take it back. It's because they developed this attitude because stores believe, I don't know why, they believe that you can take home their software they sell for Xbox, make a copy, and then bring it back to the store and get your money back and get a game for free. So to combat this, stores do not let you return software, whether it's Windows or a game or whatever. If it's digital and you bought it at a store, there is no returns on it. It's buy it as is. So games are still treated like a stepchild to this day. And they make more money now, reportedly, than movies and music combined. Wow, dude. When I was a kid, I remember a time when there was no video games. There was just music and movies, and that's what I was big into. And over time, video games has surpassed that in what people spend on it. So as the master of all gaming, I am here to make videos now for all my fellow gamers out there who want to know the history. I am all about it. But today, this video is all about the state of games in 2021. The state of games is this. There is no new innovation to push the hardware of PlayStation and Xbox anymore. There's just not. The software is not there to push the hardware. Usually they have always taken a loss on the hardware because the games were so awesome. They were going to push the hardware out, get in enough homes that the software would make up for the sales of that hardware, right? For what the company had to eat to. If it takes Microsoft $500 to make a console, but they sell it for $400, they're losing $100 there. So, but they make that up if the software is really great. They make more than enough to make up for it. The software's not there anymore. I can't justify spending $500 on the new PlayStation or Xbox when the software just is not there. So what I have done, and I have started experimenting with, is going back to retro gaming. And this has gotten me into the retro handhelds. Primarily, they come from China. My own country refuses to make them, even though there's a huge global interest in these things. They basically are small handheld units the size of phones. Some of them have controls built into them. Some of them do not. But playing primarily on Android or Linux is how you're going to play on these little Android phones. And they're playing old video game systems, the original 2600, all the ColecoVisions, all the Nintendo, all the Sega, all the 8-bit stuff from those times back in the 80s. All that stuff is playing flawlessly on these little handhelds you can slip into a pocket. Take anywhere, play on the bus, play in the car, play at the wherever you're bored. Pop it out, play it, put it back, saves your state. It can have headphones on there. It's just amazing, totally amazing. For me to be into computers and video games, to think of how it used to be, you had to have a controller. You had to have a TV of some sort. You had to have a big bulky console. You had to have the software, maybe a cartridge, maybe a disc. You had all these accessories and all this hardware that was huge and would fill up a living room. And now you fit it into something this big that fits in your pocket. It's this thin, that big. I mean, it is just tiny. The size of a phone packs in everything. It's got the screen. It's got the processor. It's got the software in there. It's got the controller in there. It's all one unit. Completely mind-blowing for someone that was there from the beginning and watched it as it was just is a huge hardware just shrink down out of this little tiny. I've been looking at the Funkey. So Funkey. They've recently put out a little tiny clamshell Game Boy that you can literally put on your keychain. It is that tiny. I have always been to miniatures and I've always been into electronics. And so I love anything that plays video games that's miniature electronic. I absolutely love the tiny Game Boys, the trim UI. I mean, I'm all into miniature handhelds. I've always had a PSP. I even got a Vita. I shouldn't because it was just a waste of my time, but I still, for the love of the things, got myself a Vita, blue OLED to boot. So love the handhelds, love retro gaming because there's a lot of innovation that existed there that does not exist in current software. So to be paying a lot of money for hardware and remastered software when there's so much to be played on little retro handheld consoles that innovated more so, that's where I've been poking my nose lately. I've been going into the retro games on the little retro handheld, so that's a lot of Android gaming, and it's a lot of playing on Linux. So basically finding more interest in retro gaming because there was more innovation there, and current games that are coming out just don't have the innovation. So really, like I've kind of said throughout this entire video, which is getting kind of long now, VR is kicking it with its experience and its entry, lowering the barrier to entry and the intense feeling you get of being immersed in the game. So immersion and lower cost of entry is really pushing VR now. And I think it's going to surpass and hurdle the flat screen, which is now going into big hardware, 4K SSD, wonderful. But it doesn't have what we're looking for in terms of the software. It's not innovating. It's not coming up and catching up with the hardware that it wants to play on to really make us say, wow, that's immersive, as a flat screen experience, But looking at VR and VR headsets, which is so much more immersive, the consoles are going to have to get their butt in gear. And PC gaming, oh my God, dude, you've got to get the cheaters out of there. You've got to way lower your cost of entry. One thing that I found very interesting over the last 5 years is how the consoles and the PC are trying to meld into one. really, there's not going to be a distinction between PC gaming and console gaming in like the next 5 to 10 years. That's my prediction, because I've already watched the likes of like the Alienware Alpha come out. I was on the fence about buying that thing, and what it was a small form factor Xbox size PC. It was slated to run Steam preloaded on the thing, ready to go. So you log into your Steam, all of your games automatically download onto this thing, and it was supposed to play in stellar. It was Alienware. Alienware, if you don't know, is one of the high-end computer manufacturers for the last 20 years. They make high-end, great gaming computers, basically. I mean, in all different form factors, large scale, desktop. Well, they finally came out with one within the last 5 years. I forget exactly when it was, but it was the size of an Xbox. And this thing came with the power, everything that an Xbox had. So they wanted to have a controller on it. It would turn on automatically, go straight into the games, be very simple to use, slick interface. It had to do all this, but not be an Xbox or a PlayStation. And so this Alienware Alpha came out, and its specs were just slightly lower than what the consoles were at the time. But man, totally blurred the lines between Xbox and PC. Would play PC games, would play Windows games, would play Steam games, which, as you know, are basically everything that's on the Xbox, and on the PlayStation. And so you could basically have a PC that would play everything the consoles would, and it was roughly around the same price. It wasn't like a $1,500 game rig you'd pay for now. It was about maybe $700, $600 expense. So trying to keep within the price, and now that the consoles have gone up to like 500, an Alienware at like 700 would still be right around, about the same price. So that was a very interesting thing that happened in games in the last like 5-10 years, is basically how PCs and consoles are coming one. They're becoming one. PCs want to have no cheaters, availability for X input, and the ability to use your controller out of the box. Simple, easy to use interface like Steam has. So like really the PC has been trying to be a console, even though there's this PC master race crap that goes on. It's a bunch of rich, spoiled brats that think they're better than everyone else. It's ridiculous. But there's people that think that PC is so superior to console, and it's really not. It's really not. I've played Battlefield 4 on the PC, and I played it on the Xbox One X, and you know what? Not a lot of difference. Degradation in the performance on the Xbox because it's not the PC. It didn't have quite the powerful video card that was in the PC. But you know what? The graphics were just about the same. I was not going to notice anything that much more dramatic between the PC and the console. By that point in time, Battlefield had come to be 64 players no matter what you played it on. It was the same game, the same maps, the same number of vehicles. Everything else was the same. So there's a total blur between the console and the PC there. So really, there is no longer any need for a PC, quite honestly, in the world of video gaming anymore. It is way too expensive. It has to be updated and upgraded, and it can't always be. One of the best arguments that I've ever heard about that prompted me to get a gaming PC was just upgrade the hardware whenever you want. Nah, it doesn't work like that. 5 years later, when you need to put a new graphics card in there, your old motherboard and whatever else ain't going to work with a new graphics card. So then guess what? In order to get your new graphics card you want to upgrade, you got to upgrade the motherboard too. That is a new PC. I'm sorry, that is a new PC. A new motherboard. And usually that's another power supply. You want to throw a brand new graphics card that uses a ton more power than other ones used to use from 5-10 years ago. You want to throw that in your PC? It's not going to use the same power requirement as an old card. It's going to need a new power supply. New power supply, motherboard, and graphics card, dude, that is a new PC. Hello. It's not just so simple as to go upgrade your PC like you're led to believe when you research this stuff online. So I'm not going to deal with the expense or the hassle or the tech support that has to be done when a game doesn't play or a controller doesn't work or whatever on a PC. It's just, I'd rather be playing games. I don't have a lot of time as I get older. I'd rather be playing games. So PC, you left yourself in the dust years ago. Sorry, I got nothing for you anymore. I jumped off the PC ship a long time ago and decided if everything's going to be the same on the console, I'm just going to play on the console. What PC exclusive is there that I have to have? None. Any innovation there? None. So again, the line being blurred between PC and console. The games are pretty much the same on both platforms. They play the exact same way. Nope. I'm no longer going to spend a lot of money on a PC for what? What game? What game has to be played on the PC that cannot be played on a console? Arma wasn't worth it. My second game rig after the one that I got to play Battlefield on, I got a second game rig later in life, 10 years later, that I could play Arma on. Dude, Arma was the biggest piece of garbage. I tried to play it in single play. It couldn't even get through the missions in single play. I tried to play it in multiplayer. It was a mess. It was just not a fun game. It was not a Battlefield by any means. And that's what I was looking for, was something like a Battlefield. It was not. So I decided no more on the PC. PC gaming was just such a headache. Cheaters, expensive, no innovation. Like, why would you pay anything to play on PC? Makes no sense to me. And this is what I tell my family, my friends, everyone, clients, coworkers, everybody. I say, don't even waste your time playing on a PC. It's worthless. If you actually like playing video games instead of screwing around with fixing things, then you play on a console. Playing on a console, sweet. But I just outlined that recently consoles are not really innovating with their software. Their hardware is getting more expensive. And we have the new Oculus, the new VR, that's got a lower point of entry and more immersive games. So I see the 3 layers now, from where it started with the 2600 when I was 10, all the way up till now. I've watched video games in their entire existence, from the time they started to right now. And this is what I notice. We basically have PC that's worthless. We have consoles that have tried to basically be a PC, and the PC's tried to be a console. So really, what's the difference there? You might as well save your money and just get a console. But consoles are starting to get more expensive, and they're not really keeping up with the new VR that's coming out. And there's also the retro gaming that comes on. Not only you can set yourself up, I set myself up a laptop to go download all the retro games that I wanted, because I wanted a terabyte full of retro games. So I went and downloaded for every platform I could, every game that I wanted, and I have trillions of games now. Not literally, but I have quite a few. They all exist on this one laptop. It's not a high-dollar laptop. It doesn't even have a graphics card. I plug it into the TV, I run emulators, and they play the software, and I play ancient games that nobody cares about anymore. But it's fun. It's great. There's a lot of innovation you can find in that old software that's not come around in the last 20 years worth of gaming. So retro gaming is totally awesome. From that laptop that I could connect to anything, I could also just move the games from that laptop onto SD cards on my little handheld units. And basically, so I have a laptop that I hook to TVs that I can play there, or I can just save the games that are on that same laptop onto my little handheld units, and I can go mobile. So, I mean, like, I've created myself a switch, and very, very cheap. You know, this old laptop I was using was nothing, man. At least, a $300 computer, probably maybe even less than that. It was like worth, way less than a Switch. I threw retro games on there, and bam, dude, I'm playing all kinds of Nintendo games from my childhood that I wouldn't be able to play today on the Switch. There's not a lot of 8-bit stuff, I think, coming out on the Switch. I don't know. I've gotten off of Nintendo for a lot of years, but so really, as a gamer that wants to play everything, not just be relegated to Nintendo's platform and just their games, and want to play that stuff, but also adult stuff, I've had to get into retro gaming. I've got into the one device I love that it's my go-to every day now is the Mochi i7S. Oh my God. If you're listening, Mochi, if you're listening, Snail, the people in China, Snail Mobile that has made the Mochi, I would love to sell this in the United States for you. I know you just have Amazon sites and whatever for people to buy it from, but I would love to go around and promote the Mochi, create commercials, whatever, because I believe so heavily in this little device. It is an Android 8 cell phone with built-in gaming controls, and it is the only one like it on Earth right now. You cannot find another phone that powerful with built-in controls. That's a phone. There's devices that have built-in controls. They're not phones. They're powerful. They're not phones. You can find phones that are really powerful that will play some video games, but they're not geared for games. They're geared for being phones. Sony decided to get out of the mobile game completely because they figured that people were just going to play on cell phones, and so they just abandoned it and went straight totally, completely to their PlayStation line. Abandoned many lines of different mobile gadgets that they'd come up with. They had a PSP Go, various different types of PSP. They had a few variations of the Vita. But they never stuck with any of it. All of it died. So I've been doing Android gaming, getting into Android for the first time to see what kind of innovation is in there. Unfortunately, Android, in my experience so far, is a cash grab. That's all it is. It's cheap and free to play games, so that when you get inside, it is buy all the skins and guns and whatever kind of backgrounds, music, whatever you want to make it look fun. And that's how they're making their money. But that's what they're geared towards. They're not geared toward good gameplay. They're not geared toward innovation. They're not geared toward anything interesting. They're just there to put out a fish hook and say, I'm going to reel in as many dollars as I can. And so Android has been a very disappointing platform in my experience so far. I love the independent development, but I'm just not seeing the lack of wanting to make money, A, and the innovation, B. So that's the problems that I've experienced with Android gaming. I do love some of the AAA games on there. I love a lot of the indies on there. I love the fact that a lot of the games are free, but they really have just not really thought about the gameplay in a lot of these games. It really feels to me more like a cash grab everywhere I go. They always want you to upgrade or update or buy the new version or just buy skins in the game, whatever. And I'm just like, I'm not pay to win. I can't stand pay to win. If you can pay money and do better than me in the game, I hate that game, and so does everybody else. There should be no existence of anything called pay to win. And you find this a lot in the Android games. I get so upset when someone kills me in Call of Duty Mobile because they pay. And I can tell because they have a different skin that I don't have, a different gun that I don't have access to because they pay money. And I hate that. I can't stand that. Nothing ruins a game faster than pay to win players. And so that's the problem with Android. It's all just about a cash grab to make money. So PC's got problems. It needs to fix. It needs to lower its barrier of entry to get in. It needs to be more like a console. There needs to be a whole plethora of Alienware alphas that are like trying to be a console. But it's a PC, a Steam machine. We were supposed to have a Steam machine. For anybody who doesn't know, Steam was going to put out their own hardware console that played their own Linux Steam. So you could just buy this thing, take it out of the box, plug it to the TV, log into your Steam account, and have access to all your games. Boom, right there. I mean, that was amazing. Valve never went through on it. They never came out with the Steam machine. They basically led everybody to believe that there would be a Steam machine. So a lot of makers started making Windows boxes in anticipation of the Steam machine coming out, and it never came out, dude. One of the biggest failures is Valve not continuing on the wonderful controller they came up with, the Steam controller. They discontinued that. Biggest drop of the ball ever in video gaming. And also the Steam box that was supposed to come out. Biggest drop of the ball in gaming history ever. That's right alongside with the Vita and Sony discontinuing the Vita. These are some of the worst atrocities that have happened in all of video gaming that I've witnessed in my entire life. Such good opportunities. Steam had to come out with a Steam box with its own Steam controller and push that to make PC gaming and Steam gaming more alluring to gamers than consoles. That alone would have pushed the consoles basically out of the market. Other than Nintendo, who caters to children primarily, they're not going to go anywhere. They got their own niche. But the other console makers, primarily Sony and Microsoft, would have been pushed out of the market had that happened. So there needed to be a greater push for a PC console, as I like to call it, a PC console. Something that plays like an Xbox, like a PlayStation, but is actually a PC. They can play all of those games and PC games and Steam games. God, if you could play Linux, Steam, Mac, all on one device, oh my God, it's like a gamer's dream right there, right? So PC's got some work to do. It needs to lower that entry. It needs to get rid of the cheaters. It needs to come up with more innovative games in its own right. PC's got a long road ahead of it to actually be something that I'm interested in, and I'm a lifelong gamer. Consoles are trying to be like PC, but they're getting too expensive. They've got to remain that lower barrier, just like the VR is right now. If the new PlayStation and the new Xbox today was the same price, $300 as a VR Quest 2, tough, man. That's a hard thing to get into. That's a hard thing to pass on any of that. But the fact that the consoles have gone up in price to $500 with no new real games that are grabbing me by my cojones and making me say, you've got to play this. There's no Battlefields out there, even though Battlefield game that I love is not innovating. So like there is nothing that is providing impetus for me to buy another console. I have no inclination to buy another PC to play games on. Literally what I bought is my Moji. That's like my coolest game unit right now. I'm playing a ton of PSP, which is my favorite portable platform. I'm playing a ton of Android. I'm playing a ton of, these are the platforms that adults have to play on. If you don't want to play on Nintendo, but you still want to play on a handheld, you're looking to Android. You're looking to Sony's previous legacy systems, PSP, Vita. Those are platforms, some of my favorite. Those are where most of my favorite games lie. But they're ancient. They're like 10, 15 years old now. So to play more modern, great-looking great games on a big screen, on a great big high-def screen, like you have to play Android. You pretty much have to play Android games. They're the newer software that's coming out, as far as gaming. So there's need to be innovation across the board on all platforms, everything. From PC to console to handheld, it's all got to innovate better. It's got to be more immersive, and it's got to use my voice. The fact that there's only a handful of games in all of gaming that utilizes voice for voice command for AI or whatever, ridiculous. There needs to be more innovation than that. Really grab my attention. Bring me in. So that's the state of gaming in 2021. The fixes for the PC are to just become cheaper but more powerful. Come up with more innovative games and don't allow cheaters. Those are things that I would love to see for PC gaming. Consoles need to be more like PC but still remain cheap in price. Still have the power that a PC brings and the same easy user interface, the same ability to just use a controller in a very simple way to just pick up and play games. That's been your strength. You got to keep that. You can't become the thing that I got to troubleshoot. Consoles cannot be the thing that I got to troubleshoot, research. This whole thing with stick drift on all the platforms, all the consoles, like that's got to be erased. That's got to be fixed. Console, like the drift in consoles and controllers is only a new thing. That's not been something we've talked about in the whole existence of gaming. It's really not. So the drift issue has to be fixed, addressed, fixed. It's got to be like stamped out. You got to get rid of the whole drift problem because that's really going to kill gaming. If I knew that I would have drift on every single game I'd play on, no matter what platform, hard pressed to want to even play video games, quite honestly. And we're talking about this with an income for video games that surpasses movies and games. Dude, if you want that to continue, you're going to have to fix these problems that you have inherent in PC gaming, console gaming, and the cash grab that's in the portable space, in the Android space. I want to see more AAA titles that are not just trying to be a cash grab. I want to see better games on the handheld space. We could look to the great games that existed on the PSP, and modern versions like those games would be great. It'd be awesome. One handheld unit that had the power and ability to play wonderfully PSP games and modern games, like that's really what all gamers want, right? Something they can take anywhere, have the freedom to play anything, anywhere. Like as a gamer, that's my mantra: anything, anywhere. And I think that's what all gamers feel. And so that's what we need from all the platforms. And if they need to combine, if PC and console need to combine to become something else that's better, that everybody will be into, hey man, they were starting to do that. Steam and Valve was starting to do that. They had come up with the Steam box that was going to blur those lines between a console and a PC. And that's where it needs to go. We need to get rid of the expensive PC part of it, have just one console, and basically one portable, that's the best that it can possibly be. It plays everything anywhere. What else would you have to have if you just had that? So that is what I feel is the state of gaming in 2021. And I know this is a hot topic. A lot of gamers, especially now with COVID, people having to be indoors. Gaming is really, really hot, especially the topic of the retro gaming and the handhelds and stuff. I get so many hits on those on those videos. I want to start doing more videos on the Chinese handhelds because there's a ton of them. Wicked Gamer. Oh my God. I watch that guy all the time. He always has the Chinese handhelds, and he gives you a great breakdown of what's involved. I love Wicked Gamer. So I'm aspiring to be like a Wicked Gamer. I want to have as many handhelds as that guy has coming in, and I want to review them just like he does because he does a great job, and I know I could add my own spin, my own flavor, my own intricacies that maybe those other guys don't cover. So basically, what would I say? What would I suggest to a brand new gamer who's just getting into gaming in 2021? Well, what I do over 40 years of walking hand in hand with games, never walking away from them at all, putting my whole life into games, I'd say what I'm doing right now is emoji. It's Moqi, but it's pronounced emoji. And it's the i7S, and it's a portable Android phone that has emulators to play virtually any game. It has the innards, and it's so powerful enough it can play virtually anything. And it connects to a TV. So, like, if you're looking to play Switch, oh my God, you could play so many. Like, Switch is going to play current Nintendo stuff. It's not necessarily going to play the old 8-bit, 16-bit. All the old Nintendo stuff is not necessarily there. But you can play all that old Nintendo stuff on something like Emoji with emulation. So you still have this whole world of old school Nintendo, not necessarily newer stuff, but old school Nintendo. Plus you got PSP, plus you got old game consoles, plus you got PC. Plus you just have like the world at your fingertips as far as gaming. Retro gaming has opened me up to basically the whole entire world of gaming that existed in the 40 years I've been alive. All the games I couldn't play because there was just not enough time in my life to play them as I've existed, I can go back now and replay old ones that I played or play new ones that I wanted to play then. I mean, retro gaming really opens up, and it takes away from the newer gaming stuff that's charging so much money because the retro gaming is a lot cheaper. The games usually just download off the internet for free. So retro gaming is becoming more appealing than the current state of gaming going forward, except, I will say, for the Quest. The Quest is this brand new way of playing in virtual reality. The games are completely immersive. It's just a whole new way of playing that's just totally cool. You know, a lot of people are saying a lot of the future of gaming. It's going to be how all games, how all media is experienced in the future. We're going to be pretty gung-ho into VR in like 20 years, 30 years. I mean, it's going. Quest 2 is flying off the shelves right now. People are using their Facebook accounts to sign up on it. Nobody wants to, but they're doing it anyway. There's a ton of love going on for the Quest 2 right now. Huge buzz, a lot of innovation being opened up to developers for independent development. I mean, there's a lot of great creativity that's going on with the Quest 2 right now, something that the PC and the consoles are sorely lacking. So my suggestion is get into retro, get a cheap handheld that you can take anywhere and play anything on, something like Emoji, and get away from the big, bulky hardware requirements that are going on from the PC side or the console side. You don't need to pay a lot for high-end hardware to have fun with great, great software. It doesn't take big, 4K SSD machines that run a lot of electricity and have huge video cards and this. You don't need any of that. You can take a small handheld, play a billion free retro games, and man, you're going to have a blast. So that's the sad state of video games. The other thing I'd like to mention real quick on the state of video games is with regard to the retro games and downloading for free off the internet. There's a lot of no discussion and misinformation because there's just nobody wants to talk about it when it comes to the copyright of these old video games when you play on retro devices. Everyone says it's a legal gray area, so no one wants to talk about it. No one wants to tell you where to go or what website to go to download these old video games. That is horrible. That is evil. And what it is the sheep that gamers are, they don't want to offend anybody. They're usually kind of nerdy. They're usually more into software than people. They don't want to piss people off, whatever. They just kind of sit back and they get spit on for being gamers, and they get are basically made fun of for being gamers, and they get told that they're thieves if they want to download games for free off the internet. All of that is garbage. The way it really runs is, it turns out that if Nintendo doesn't care about games that it used to sell 20 years ago, and it let the patents expire on those games 20 years ago, those games, technically, the patents for those games anyway, are owned by the people, by that community, by that country, by that whoever. They basically go back to the hands of the people. So when patent owners create a patent and they use it for a long time, but then they just discard it because they come up with a new patent or they come up with something new and they don't need the old one anymore. We don't just lose that patent, it goes into the hands of the people, right? I use this example that if someone had patented the toilet and eventually died and just forgotten about the patent for the toilet because they'd created other things, are we supposed to not use toilets because there exists a patent for it that has existed even though no one cares about it and no one's making money out of it? No, we would still need toilets. Well, bottom line is, when it comes to software, software is very much an art. It's an art form. One thing I've always done in games is I've always just taken the time to go through and examine the art. I don't just run through a game for the purpose of what it's supposed to be played for. I will literally sit there and just look at the art on the walls. I will be the guy in the online game in the corner looking at something on the wall because there's like a banner there, a poster there, some kind of art that the game maker put in. I love to just go through and look at the worlds created by these artists. And I've always felt that way. It's the thing that compels me to play games. So it is art, the same way art hangs on the walls in museums. And so these online websites that let you download games for free, they're basically keeping art form that would just fade away into oblivion and not be enjoyed by anybody had they not been putting them out on the internet. And instead of being revered as museums that they are, that should be sharing these works of art with anybody who wants to enjoy these works of art, instead, they're constantly being threatened by people who don't care about making any money off those games and just shutting them down because they just want to be evil. And that's not really right. If we allowed people that were into art to go around and shut down museums because they didn't want people to enjoy the art that was there because someone couldn't make money off of it, even though nobody cared about making money off of it, like, that's a stink that doesn't need to exist, right? If people are quietly not hurting anyone, not taking away money from anyone and downloading some software that's ancient that no one cares about, they're keeping it alive for future generations. That's wonderful. It's like they're keeping art alive for future generations to enjoy the same way. So I see software games as art, and so they need to be preserved as art, the same way we make a big stink about having museums to preserve that art. This is digital art for a digital age, and it can't just go by the wayside because there's no physical brick and mortar museums to go house. And there are a few. There's a few angelic angels in the society. One individual that I saw in my research actually set up a place in Oakland, California, where he has a museum for video games where you can literally go in for 20 minutes, play for free any console that's existed that they have in their collection there that's 20, 30 years old. Go play games from that time. Experience what it was like then. Dude, there's nothing wrong with preserving that art. Blessed are the souls that take their own resources and go try to get donations to set up museums where people can play video games and experience that art that existed so long ago. So this whole argument about the legality and the gray area about downloading video games on these websites and nobody wants to talk about them or tell anybody where to get them. Well, you know what? That's a thing of the past. We're not thieves trying to make money off of someone else's efforts. We are simply nerdy gaming enthusiasts that want to sit down and enjoy a piece of software by ourselves or sometimes with other people that love it just as much as we do, and we'll gladly pay for it. Gladly. There's no one trying to steal anything from anybody. As gamers, we want to pay money so that the games will get better from the game makers. So we are glad to pay. But any Nintendo that comes today and says, well, you can't, play these games you get download on this website for free, even though they're not selling them, dude, give me an avenue to go buy them and I will pay you for them, Nintendo. I won't go download them for free. I will gladly, as a gamer, pay you for the efforts you put into to make that game. I am all about supporting gamers, game makers that make games. I want them to make the best games, and I want them to make them so there are no cheaters in there and they're fun to play. And how does that happen? By me spending money on them. So give me an avenue and I will buy those games. But if you have no avenue for me to pay, You have no store where these games are available, but you want to go thump on the heads of website owners that do put those games out because you don't care about them anymore? No, that is wrong. And the legislation needs to protect online entities where the patents have expired long ago. And the Nintendos of the world don't care about their games anymore, those games anymore. And they just relinquish them and say, it's fine. We made those games then. We made money off of them then. Have them for free. We don't care. Play them. That's the kind of company we are. Dude, I would have respect for a company that says that, and I would buy all their new games and pay them top dollar for them because I respect them. So this whole thing about gamers being thieves trying to make a buck off of free games on the internet, it's ludicrous. It's stupidity. I don't know who came up with this, but it's evil. And I'm tired of listening to it. The truth is, we are downloading games from websites that need to be preserved as works of art, and we need to share them on with all of our friends and other websites and torrent sites and whatever, all that we can, so that these games rather can be utilized in the future. They can be put in so many areas they can't be stamped out. Someone will always have a copy somewhere of some game that he can use to repopulate the earth if need be. I see them as seeds. These websites they have the seeds of these games, and these copies can be made, and these seeds can be put all over the earth for everyone to enjoy. And that's really the reality of the situation. So any company that wants to come back and say, we want to throw down the hammer on a website that's putting out games that we don't care about anymore, and we don't give you a way to buy anymore, and we have nothing to do with anymore. Dude, no, get out of here. So that's the state of copyright when it comes to gaming. So, my friends, I hope you have enjoyed this hour of conversation about video gaming. It's now time for me to go be a dad and do what I do. Thanks for listening. There'll be more in the future. Happy gaming.